Hello and welcome to McIver's Grant Public Library's Chapter Book Storytime. We are reading Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the Lightning Thief. This book was written by Rick Riordan. He wrote the words, so he's the author. And we are using this beautiful illustrated version by John Rocco. This book was published by Disney Hyperion, and we are starting chapter 21, which is called I Settle My Tab. It's funny how humans can wrap their mind around things and fit them into their version of reality. Sheeran had told me that long ago. As usual, I didn't appreciate his wisdom until much later. According to the LA News, the explosion at the Santa Monica beach had been caused when a crazy kidnapper fired a shotgun at a police car. He accidentally hit a gas main that had ruptured during the earthquake. The crazy kidnapper, aka Ares, was the same man who had abducted me and two other adolescents in New York and brought us across country on a 10-day odyssey of terror. Poor little Percy Jackson wasn't an international criminal. After all, he'd caused a commotion on that Greyhound bus in New Jersey trying to get away from his captor, and afterward witnesses would even swear they'd seen a leather-clad man on the bus. Why didn't I remember him from before? The crazy man had caused the explosion in the St. Louis Arch. After all, no kid could have done that. A concerned waitress in Denver had seen the man threatening his abductees outside her diner, gotten a friend to take a photo, and notified the police. Finally, brave Percy Jackson, I was beginning to like this kid, had stolen a gun from his captor in Los Angeles and battled him shotgun to rifle on the beach. Police had arrived just in time, but in the spectacular explosion, 5 police cars had been destroyed and the captor had fled. No fatalities had occurred. Percy Jackson and his 2 friends were safely in police custody. The reporters fed us this whole story. We just nodded and acted tearful and exhausted, which wasn't hard, and played victimized kids for the cameras. All I want, I said, choking back my tears, is to see my loving stepfather again. Every time I saw him on TV calling me a delinquent punk, I knew, somehow, that we would be okay. And I know he'll want to reward each and every person in this beautiful city of Los Angeles with a free major appliance from his store. Here's the phone number. The police and reporters were so moved that they passed around the hat and raised money for 3 tickets on the next plane to New York. I knew there was no choice but to fly. I hoped Zeus would cut me some slack considering the circumstances, but it was still hard to force myself on board the flight. Takeoff was a nightmare. Every spot of turbulence was scarier than a Greek monster. I didn't unclench my fists from the armrests until we touched down safely at LaGuardia. The local press was waiting for us outside security, but we managed to evade them thanks to Annabeth, who lured them away in her invisible Yankees cap, shouting, "They're over by the frozen yogurt, come on!" and then rejoined us at baggage claim. We split up on the taxi stand. I told Annabeth and Grover to go back to Half-Blood Hill and let Sheeran know what had happened. They protested, and it was hard to let them go after all we'd been through, but I knew I had to do this last part of the quest by myself. If things went wrong, if the gods didn't believe me, I wanted Annabeth and Grover to survive, to tell Sheeran the truth. I hopped in a taxi and headed into Manhattan. And here's a picture of Percy in front of the cameras, and here's a picture of the elevator. Where do you think he's going? 30 minutes later, I walked into the lobby of the Empire State Building. I must have looked like a homeless kid with my tattered clothes and my scraped-up face. I hadn't slept in at least 24 hours. I went up to the guard at the front desk and said, 600th floor. He was reading a huge book with a picture of a wizard on the front. It wasn't much into fantasy, but the book must have been good because the guard took a while to look up. No such floor, kiddo. I need an audience with Zeus. He gave me a vacant smile. Sorry? You heard me. I was about to decide the guy was just a regular mortal, and I'd better run for it before he called the straitjacket patrol when he said, "No appointment, no audience, kiddo. Lord Zeus doesn't see anybody unannounced." "Oh, I think he'll make an exception." I slipped off my backpack and unzipped the top. The guard looked inside at the metal cylinder, not getting what it was for a few seconds, and then his face went pale. "That isn't." "Yes, it is," I promised. "You want me to take it out and—" No. He scrambled out of his seat, fumbled around his desk for a key card, and then handed it to me. "Insert this in the security slot. Make sure nobody else is in the elevator with you." I did as he told me. As soon as the elevator doors closed, I slipped the key into the slot and the card disappeared, and a new button appeared on the console, a red one that said 600. I pressed it and waited and waited. Music played. Raindrops keep falling on my head. Finally, ding, the door slid open. I stepped out and almost had a heart attack. I was standing on a narrow stone walkway in the middle of the air. Below me, Manhattan, from the height of an airplane. In front of me, white marble steps wound up the spine of a cloud into the sky. My eyes followed the stairway to its end, where my brain just could not accept what I saw. Look again, my brain said. We're looking, Mize insisted. It's really there. From the top of the clouds rose the decapitated peak of a mountain, its summit covered with snow. Clinging to the mountainside were dozens of multi-level palaces, a city of mansions, all with white-columned porticos, gilded terraces, and bronze braziers, glowing with 1,000 fires. Roads wound crazily up to the peak, where the largest palace gleamed against the snow. Precariously perched gardens bloomed with olive trees and rose bushes. I could make out an open-air market filled with colorful tents, a stone amphitheater built on one side of the mountain, a hippodrome and coliseum on the other. It was an ancient Greek city, except that it wasn't in ruins. It was new and clean and colorful, the way Athens must have looked 2,500 years ago. This place can't be here, I told myself. The tip of a mountain hanging over New York City like a billion-ton asteroid? How could something like that be anchored above the Empire State Building in plain sight of millions of people and not get noticed? But here it was, and here I was. My trip through Olympus was a daze. I passed some giggling wood nymphs who threw olives at me from their garden. Hawkers in the market offered to sell me ambrosia on a stick, and a new shield, and a genuine glitter-weave replica of the Golden Fleece as seen on Hephaestus TV. The 9 muses were tuning their instruments for a concert in the park, while a small crowd gathered, satyrs and naiads and a bunch of good-looking teenagers who might have been minor gods and goddesses. Nobody seemed worried about an impending civil war. In fact, everybody seemed in a festive mood. Several of them turned to watch me pass and whispered to themselves. I climbed the main road toward the big palace at the peak. It was a reverse copy of the palace in the underworld. There everything had been black and bronze, and here everything glittered white and silver. I realized Hades must have built his palace to resemble this one. He wasn't welcomed in Olympus except in the winter solstice, so he'd build his own, Olympus underground. Despite my bad experience with him, I felt a little sorry for the guy. To be banished from this place seemed really unfair. It would make anybody bitter. Steps led up to the central courtyard. Past that, the throne room. Room really wasn't the right word. The place made Grand Central Station look like a broom closet. Massive columns rose to a domed ceiling which was gilded with moving constellations. 12 thrones, built for the beings the size of Hades, were arranged in an inverted U, just like the cabins at Camp Half-Blood. An enormous fire crackled in the central hearth pit. The thrones were empty except for 2 at the end, the head throne on the right and the one to its immediate left. I didn't have to be told who the 2 gods were that were sitting there waiting for me to approach. I came toward them, my legs trembling. The gods were in giant human form, as Hades had been, but I could barely look at them without feeling a tingle, as if my body were starting to burn. Zeus, the lord of the gods, wore a dark blue pinstriped suit. He sat on a simple throne of solid platinum. He had a well-trimmed beard, marble gray and black like a storm cloud. His face was proud and handsome and grim, his eyes rainy gray. As I got nearer to him, the air crackled and smelled of ozone. The god sitting next to him was his brother, without a doubt, but he was dressed very differently. He reminded me of the beachcomber from Key West. He wore leather sandals, khaki Bermuda shorts, and a Tommy Bahama shirt with coconuts and parrots all over it. His skin was deeply tanned, his hands scarred like an old-time fisherman's. His hair was dark like mine, and his face had the same brooding look that had always gotten me branded as a rebel. But his eyes, sea green like mine, were surrounded by sun crinkles that told me he smiled a lot too. His throne was deep-sea fisherman's chair. It was a simple, swiveling kind with a black leather seat and a built-in holster for a fishing pole. Instead of a pole, the holster held a bronze trident, flickering with green light around its tips. The gods weren't moving or speaking, but there was a tension in the air, as if they'd just finished an argument. I approached the fisherman's throne and knelt at his feet. Father, I dared not look up. My heart was racing. I could feel the energy emanating from the 2 gods. If I said the wrong thing, I had no doubt they would blast me into dust. To my left, Zeus spoke. Should you not have addressed the master of this house first, boy? I kept my head down and waited. Peace, brother, Poseidon finally said. His voice stirred my oldest memories, that warm glow I remembered as a baby, the sensation of this god's hand on my forehead. The boy defers to his father. This is only right. You still claim him then, Zeus asked menacingly. You claim this child whom you sired against our sacred oath? I've admitted my wrongdoing, Poseidon said. Now I would hear him speak. Wrongdoing. A lump welled in my throat. Was that all I was? A wrongdoing? The result of a god's mistake? I've spared him once already, Zeus grumbled, daring to fly through my domain. Pah! I should have blasted him out of the sky for his impudence. And risk destroying your own master bold? Poseidon asked calmly. Let us hear him out, brother. Zeus grumbled some more. I shall listen, he decided, and then I shall make up my mind whether or not to cast this boy down from Olympus. Perseus, Poseidon said. Look at me. I did, and I wasn't sure what I saw in his face. There was no clear sign of love or approval, nothing to encourage me. It was like looking at the ocean. Some days you could tell what mood it was in, most days, though, it was unreadable and mysterious. I got the feeling Poseidon really didn't know what to think of me. He didn't know whether he was happy to have me as a son or not. In a strange way, I was glad that Poseidon was so distant. If he tried to apologize or told me he loved me or even smiled, it would have felt fake, like a human dad making some lame excuse for not being around. I could live with that after all. I wasn't so sure about him yet, either. Address Lord Zeus, boy, Poseidon told me. Tell him your story. Okay, I'm going to show you these pictures, and then we're gonna stop here today, and we're going to let Percy tell his story the next time we meet. Okay? I hope you're enjoying this book. I am. I don't want to put it down. It's almost over. Have a great day.